Hello everyone, I'm Jack, and I'd like to welcome you to the Auren and Kireth series. I'll be your new narrator from here on out, but if you'd like to catch up on earlier chapters, they're all available for free on our channel, along with plenty of other fun sci-fi stories. Now, let's jump in. Auren was sore, aching all over, but thankfully still able to move, unlike some others in Third Company. Rayburn had left her for now to deliver a more detailed report, each soldier's perspective critical in understanding whether the enemy's tactics had truly shifted. That left Auren some time to quietly observe her fellow soldiers. A few still rested in their cots, others were accompanied by friends or medics, receiving care or conversation to pass the time. She saw a wide range of injuries: burns, bruises, arms in slings. Despite the explosion, they had managed to escape with nearly everyone intact, their armor absorbing much of the blast. Star citizens and humans mingled, speaking in low tones to avoid disturbing the more seriously wounded. But Auren's moment of quiet didn't last. Her sensitive ears picked up a voice she recognized instantly, Captain Shaughness barking from across the medbay. "Corporal Auren?" He didn't need to repeat it. She jumped up and made her way quickly to his bedside. He was already coughing by the time she reached him, one leg elevated, bandages running high beneath his gown. He looked ready to shout again, but paused when he saw her. A rare smile touched his lips as he set something on the side table. "Corporal," he caught himself, then gave a small nod. "Sergeant Auren, sorry, I'm still adjusting to your promotion," Shaughness wheezed with a faint chuckle. "You're moving up the ranks too fast." He tapped the object on the table a few times until it split neatly into smaller pieces. It seemed to cut itself into thin slices, and Auren watched with interest as he began to arrange them. Some pieces bore hearts, others clovers, a few had odd little faces. Then she recognized what they were: a deck of cards. She'd seen some humans in the Third Company playing with them during breaks, though she'd never understood the appeal. Pulling up a stool, Auren watched him move the cards. "It's all right, Captain. It's as new to me as it is to you. But why'd you call me? And what's the deck for?" she asked, trying not to let too much attitude creep into her voice. Shaughness had earned more than that, injured as he was. Her rank meant little compared to the well-being of her comrades. "You ever play poker, Sergeant?" Shaughness asked instead, ignoring her question for the moment. "Never heard of it until now," Auren replied, leaning in closer to better examine the way he shuffled the cards. She decided to let him dodge her question, just this once. "That should make this more fun," he said with a sly grin, tapping the cards back into order. He dealt 2 cards to himself, then 2 to her, placing 3 more face-up in the center of the table. With a knowing nod toward the cards, he gestured for her to look closer. "Auren, what'd you get?" Shaughness asked casually. Auren paused, staring at the 2 cards in her hand. Of course she got cards, but that wasn't what he meant. The Yorpal flipped them over, assuming he wanted to know what was on them, and scanned the symbols thoughtfully. 7 clovers and a man," she said before Shaughness could stop her from revealing her hand aloud. The captain's face twisted in a mixture of disbelief and amusement before he burst into laughter, which quickly devolved into a fit of coughing. As he calmed down, realization hit. Auren truly had no clue how to play. "How have you not figured this out by now? Haven't you been with us long enough?" Shaughness teased through fading chuckles. Auren's ears flattened, more from annoyance than embarrassment. She'd had more important things to worry about than memorizing some strange human card game, like staying alive. "I might just get up and walk away if you don't plan to explain what you want," she said flatly, no longer willing to be the punchline of the moment. As much as she respected him, Shaughness had already confused her rank more than once today, and she was sore too. Lying down sounded far better than being laughed at. "Careful, I'm a spiteful man," he warned with mock seriousness, though his tone softened as he sorted through a few cards with distinct markings. He tapped them one by one as he spoke. "Hearts, clubs, spades, and diamonds. These 3 here, king, queen, and jack. This one's an ace. Number cards go up to 10. King's the highest face card, then queen, then jack, but the ace is the highest overall." "Got it?" Shaughness looked up, expecting more resistance, but instead saw Auren's focus return as her ears perked with curiosity. Auren's ears pointed forward attentively as Shaughness spoke, and she met his gaze when he paused. I get it. But what is the point of poker? She asked, carefully enunciating the unfamiliar word. Shaughnessy gave a knowing grin. You need the hand with the highest rank or value, he explained. I could rattle off all the possible hands, but really, it's better to learn by playing, don't you think? His tone remained light and teasing. Frayne exhaled loudly, the sound thick with exasperation. Sounds more like you just want to boost your ego after the mission, she muttered, the frustration in her voice echoing her earliest days in boot camp, where confusion seemed to delight the humans around her. At the mention of the mission, Shaughnessy raised his brows, as if reminded of why they were both laid up in the medbay. No, he said smoothly. I just want to talk to you, and you'll stick around longer if you don't know what's going on. His fingers moved deftly to the 3 central cards, flipping and sliding them into view, a 5, an 8, and a 4, hearts, spades, and a diamond. Frayne had no idea if they were good, but Shaughnessy's face remained unreadable. Then I may not be able to focus on the game, Frayne said, placing her cards face down with a faint scowl, but Shaughnessy only chuckled through a wheeze. You will, he said simply, flipping another card, a 7 of diamonds. He let out a low whistle, and Frayne's ears twitched at the sound, her tail beginning to sway with interest. She didn't know the rules, not really, but matching cards had to mean something. The final card with a grin before laying down his hand. 3 8s again. Frayne's proud expression dropped as her tail froze mid-wag. Tough break, Furry, Shaughnessy said with a wheeze of laughter. You'll get me next time. He casually gathered the cards and began shuffling again with the ease of someone who had done it 1,000 times. Frayne crossed her arms with a huff, determined not to let a silly game get under her skin, especially one she didn't even understand fully yet. What did you want to talk about, Captain? She asked, eyeing the new hand he dealt her with little interest. This time she got a pair of 2s again. Maybe low numbers weren't ideal, but a pair was still something, right? Shaughnessy gave a rare moment of sincerity as he leaned back. I wanted to applaud you, he said simply. You adapted well, even though your training is more ground-focused. Most wouldn't have been able to tell the difference based on how you acted out there. His praise was genuine, and it caught Frayne off guard. She barely noticed the next 3 cards. Jack of hearts, ace of spades, ace of diamonds. Thanks, but I was just following your lead, she replied, though pride warmed her chest. When another 2 hit the table, her ears perked and her tail began to sway faster. 3 of a kind had to mean something. Shaughnessy noticed the movement and smirked. Oh, the ever-so-humble Yorple, he teased, flipping one final card with a flair she didn't even register. Frayne slapped her cards down. I win, she declared triumphantly. Surely nothing beat 3 2s, until Shaughnessy, grinning wide, revealed 3 kings. His smug grin. A straight, Shaughnessy said, sounding surprised. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That actually beats my hand. Look at you. Frayne blinked, looking down at the cards as if they might confirm it themselves. It does? She asked. Yep, Shaughnessy said, nodding with a chuckle. That's how it goes sometimes. Even when you're not paying attention, you win. Natural talent. He slid the cards together again, starting another shuffle, though his eyes were now more focused on Frayne than the game. You've got the instincts, Sergeant. More than most. Doesn't matter whether it's a battlefield or a card table. Frayne felt her ears twitch at the praise, unsure if she believed it herself. She'd done what needed to be done, yes. But did that make her a leader? She hadn't asked for the promotion. It had just come after each mission, after each survival. Still don't think I'm ready to lead an army, she said, trying to sound casual. Shaughnessy grinned as he dealt a new round. Neither did I when they handed me a company. But you fast. Just like you always do. Frayne sighed, this time more thoughtful than annoyed. She glanced at her new cards, 2 face cards, something called a king and queen, and wondered if that was a good sign. She still didn't quite get the rules, but she understood the rhythm. Follow the lead, adapt, keep up. Maybe she was better at this than she thought. Than the teasing or the game itself. Frayne's attention snagged on the soft sounds of medical equipment in the background, a reminder of where they were. Still, she leaned forward and looked at her cards this time, an 8 of spades and a 9 of hearts. Fine by me, she said, her tone edged with determination. But if I start winning consistently, don't whine about your medical condition. Shaughnessy let out a rough laugh, followed by a shallow cough. "No promises," he said, then dealt the next 3 cards onto the center of the table. 10 of hearts, Jack of clubs, and Queen of diamonds. Frayne blinked. Something about those cards lined up with what she held. She looked between her hand and the table, uncertain. "That's good, right?" she asked. Shaughnessy raised a brow, glancing down. "Very good," he said, nodding. "You've got us straight again. Look at you, picking it up already." Frayne gave a small grin, a flash of pride sneaking in under the fatigue. "Guess that means you're buying," she said. Shaughnessy chuckled again, shaking his head. "You're dangerous with beginner's luck, Sergeant." As they reset the cards again, something in Frayne's chest loosened. The tension from the mission, the fear for her friends, it hadn't gone away, but it had quieted for now. In this small game, surrounded by quiet machines and the hum of recovery, she'd found a sliver of peace. And if that came at the price of a few drinks from a grumbling captain, so be it. Chuckles and conversation filled the medbay, and Frayne glanced around to see card games spreading like wildfire. More humans had entered, each bringing their own unique deck, none matching the look of Shaughnessy's cards. Some bore the bright, bold UNO logo, others displayed swirling vortex patterns, and one peculiar set featured a cat wielding a grenade, much to the confusion of the Star citizens learning the rules. Another deck boldly stated, "Cards Against Humanity," a name that left Frayne wondering what kind of game that could even be. A hum of laughter and curiosity steadily grew as humans eagerly taught their alien allies, lightening the previously somber mood. The gentle clatter of shuffling cards added to the bubbling energy in the room, and Frayne felt a swell of pride seeing both species bonding through something so simple. Despite their wounds and the recent chaos, the third company was already recovering. Emotionally, if not yet physically. The humans' resilience seemed infectious, and the Star citizens were beginning to reflect it. Frayne's ears twitched at the soft flick of cards as Shaughnessy dealt the next hand, and she turned her attention back to the game. "You did well too, Captain," she said, allowing herself a smile. "Especially with that ship. Who designed that nightmare?" Shaughnessy gave a dry chuckle, careful not to spark another coughing fit. He revealed his cards, 2 lowly 4s, and shook his head. "No idea. I remember they were introduced early in the war, then scrapped for good reason. Guess someone thinks they're worth reviving." Shaughnessy tapped his fingers against the table as Frayne revealed her hand. Just a high 9. Her ears twitched toward the surrounding medbay as the once quiet conversations had grown into a loud, energetic buzz. Sleep was now a fantasy for anyone not built to sleep through an explosion. Even those trying to maintain quiet were quickly swept into whatever card game was nearest. "Why do you think we were chosen for that mission?" Frayne asked, her voice thoughtful as Shauna dealt another hand. He gave a non-committal shrug, lifting his cards just enough to peek at them. "If I knew, I'd tell you. Honestly, we were probably just the closest unit available. Even if space combat isn't our usual role, we've proven ourselves enough," he said, his tone more grounded now, the teasing set aside. Frayne nodded slowly. It made sense. The big mouth base hadn't been assigned elsewhere, and the signal had demanded an urgent response. Still, the choice nagged at her. The mission's success hadn't changed the fact that sending them with an unfamiliar and experimental ship had been a massive risk. Shaughnessy dealt the flop, then added 2 more cards. "High card," he said, laying his cards down. Frayne's ears perked up. This could be her chance. She flipped her cards to show an ace and a jack, both matching cards on the board. Shaughnessy chuckled and gave a clap for her victory, and a wide grin spread across Frayne's face as she realized he owed her at least 1 drink now. "One more, tiebreaker," Shaughnessy offered as he dealt again. "Don't want to take all your time," but Frayne was starting to enjoy herself. Now she really wanted to win. Frayne wanted to keep playing a bit longer, but a familiar scent drifted into her nose. Specialist Rayburn had returned, and she was probably wondering where Frayne had wandered off to. Her tail began swaying, then full-on wagging as Shaughnessy dealt her a promising hand, a pair of queens. The captain noticed and couldn't help but chuckle again. The remaining cards were revealed: an ace of spades, jack of spades, and 6 of diamonds, followed by a queen of spades and a 4 of hearts. Frayne's grin widened as she confidently laid down her queens, only for Shaughnessy to chuckle and show his hand. King of spades and 10 of spades. She blinked, realizing he had a straight flush or something close, and his smug grin confirmed her loss. Throwing her head back with a groan, she ran her hands over her snout. "Good job beating a pup, I suppose," she muttered, earning another laugh from him. "Told you you'd get invested," Shaughness said. "Next time we'll work on your poker face. Now go mingle." Fran didn't ask what a poker face was. She slid off the stool and followed Rayburn's scent to where she was seated at Zetrine's bedside, tapping a colorful Uno deck. Rayburn looked up and smiled, motioning Fran over. "Great timing. We were just about to start another game," she said. Fran joined them quickly, though she groaned inside at the sight of yet another unfamiliar set of cards. Hopefully, Rayburn wouldn't tease her like Shaughness did. Or maybe she just explained things better. Rayburn then glanced toward the medbay entrance, as if expecting more company. Himmel had gone to the cafeteria in search of pizza when Rayburn nudged Fran's knee with her own, grinning. "He was raving about how grateful he was that you saved him a week in one of the beds," she said. Fran's skin flushed warmer under her fur at the contact, and she replied sheepishly, "I just did what I had to do." Rayburn's smile deepened as she seemed to stare straight through her, then said brightly, "Then you're amazing. I could explain the rules while we wait for him to come back." Turning her attention back to the deck, she began laying things out, and though Fran felt even hotter, she nodded. Around them, the medbay buzzed with laughter and celebration as card games sparked joy across the beds and chairs. But that cheerful atmosphere was tightly sealed within the medbay walls. Beyond them, things weren't nearly as lighthearted. Miss Remicki arrived at the Big Mouth Bass about an hour after the Mandarin ship had been driven off, the news of the explosion that left half of the third company wounded reaching her swiftly. She had dropped everything when called in by the humans for help. As she made her way through the familiar halls of the Big Mouth Bass, a human battleship known for its elite companies, she caught sight of the Mandarin's massive vessel, now pierced by a sleek human skirmisher known as a hub. That hub was an experimental design meant to harpoon into enemy ships and inject troops like a virus. Other vessels now swarmed the Mandarin, securing it while crews inside scoured for intelligence, battle plans, layouts, anything of value. It was surreal to remember that the sweet human at her side, Caden, was one of the minds behind the death-dealing hub. His face remained mostly unreadable as he stared at the battered ship beside her. Then he glanced around to make sure they were alone, before gently taking her scaled hand. "How long do you think you'll be?" he asked quietly. Miss Remicki had been summoned for something urgent. His head, but he didn't argue. Miss Remicki chose not to comment on the exchange as she stepped further into the room, her posture tall and composed. She had been summoned by the leadership aboard the Big Mouth Bass, and from what she had gathered, they were growing increasingly frustrated. Their attempts to contact the elders of the Yorpols and the Zumra had gone unanswered, and now they were banking on Remicki's presence to sway the situation. The theory was simple. Another Zumra might be enough to open a line of communication. Miss Remicki, though skeptical, was willing to try. "I don't think it will take long," she'd told Caden before parting, "but we both know how unpredictable life can be." The humans often referred to the Zumra as dragon people, and the longer she spent among them, the more the label made sense. The Zumra elders were proud, perhaps too proud, and even Remicki sometimes thought their formality hindered progress in the war. "All right, I'll try not to miss you too much. I'll find ways to entertain myself," Caden had said, a playful lilt in his voice. She had chuckled at that and squeezed his hand before parting. "Try not to cause too much trouble," she teased, already walking away as she felt his warm smile linger on her back. Now in the ship's control room, surrounded by high-tech terminals and alert operators, Remicki could sense the tension in the air. 3 long desks were arranged in a wide arc, each manned by at least 2 humans, while supervisors loomed just behind them. The reinforced glass at the front of the room gleamed under soft lighting, the mechanical lips framing it poised to seal in an instant. As Remicki entered, eyes turned to her with hope, frustration, and a tinge of desperation. "Finally, maybe we can get somewhere now," one muttered, only to be smacked on the head by a colleague who hissed, "Be respectful." This isn't her fault. Rumiki gave a small, knowing smile but remained silent. To interface with their systems properly, and the moment she plugged it in, the monitor's glow adjusted slightly to accommodate the new input. Miss Rumiki typed a few quick commands, her clawed fingers surprisingly deft on the unfamiliar keyboard. The Zumra were unlikely to ignore direct contact from one of their own, especially one as well-placed as she was. A silent second passed as she encoded her credentials into the outgoing transmission, an authorization sequence uniquely hers, built into the drive by human engineers. She initiated the request, and for a moment the screen only blinked with a waiting signal. Then a new message flashed in a different tone than before. Pending response. A few heads lifted from their stations. "That's new," someone murmured across the room. Miss Rumiki nodded but remained focused, narrowing her eyes at the screen. The elders were cautious, and she knew they might be screening even her signal. "If they answer, I'll be the one to speak. Make sure your systems don't auto-translate," she instructed, her voice level. The human at the console beside her nodded and made the adjustment, the translator software flickering off with a click. "I didn't think they'd respond to anyone, honestly," said another technician across the room. "Neither did I," Rumiki admitted. "But I carry more than just a message. They'll want answers about what happened on the Mandarin vessel, and I can give them that." Everyone went quiet at that, understanding that this call could shift the future of their cooperation with the Zumra. All they could do now was wait, the cursor on the screen blinking steadily as the transmission hovered between silence and connection. To properly interface with the Zumra systems. Once the thumb drive was inserted, Miss Rumiki's unique identification code registered on the console, allowing her to initiate another contact attempt. This time, the monitor didn't flash the usual error. Instead, a connection was established and the image of a female Zumra appeared. She sat at what resembled a desk, her expression cold and dismissive as her eyes barely lingered on the screen before drifting off to something else out of view. "What are you contacting us for?" she asked in a low, unimpressed hiss. Miss Rumiki blinked in surprise. She had expected a more formal or at least respectful reception. Even if the Zumra were uneasy with humans, Rumiki's status should have warranted better treatment. She glanced to the human operators beside her, but none reacted. They were focused instead on organizing reports. "We need to speak with your leadership," one of the humans responded steadily, ignoring the Zumra's demeanor. The woman on the screen gave a sigh, barely hiding her irritation, and continued scribbling notes off screen. "For?" she asked dismissively, referring to something only she understood. The human clarified with more urgency. "We believe the Mandarin have adopted a new and dangerous strategy. An Optican vessel has been destroyed, and one of the Mandarin showed signs of Optican physiology before teleporting away. We need to assess the threat and coordinate a response." The Zumra's hand paused briefly in its writing, signaling some level of recognition, but her eyes never met the camera. Then, without a word, she resumed writing. Faster this time. Seemed disorganized or suicidal. They were calculated, prepared, and had an escape plan. Miss Rumiki continued, her tone firm and composed, despite the frustration she felt brewing beneath the surface. The Zumra on the screen narrowed her eyes slightly, but still didn't respond with any visible urgency. They succeeded in eliminating an Optican vessel and escaped undetected. That alone is enough reason for concern. The humans aren't asking for military aid, they're asking for your cooperation in understanding the threat, Rumiki added, now fully addressing the Zumra representative instead of letting the humans take the brunt of the conversation. The woman on the screen leaned forward slightly, though the annoyance in her posture hadn't faded. "You're taking this very seriously," she muttered, almost accusingly, "because I've seen the consequences of underestimating our enemies." Rumiki replied coolly. Around her, the humans kept silent, recognizing that this was a conversation best handled by someone who could speak both to their intentions and from a place of shared cultural weight. Rumiki didn't flinch from the Zumra's gaze. "You are free to dismiss the humans, but you will not dismiss me," she said firmly. The other Zumra studied her for a long moment before finally leaning back. "I will pass the message to the elders," she said reluctantly. "Do not expect a prompt reply." Miss Rumiki gave a small bow of acknowledgement, masking her irritation. "That is all we ask?" she replied, and the transmission ended. The screen went dark, and a heavy silence settled over the control room before one of the humans let out a breath. "You handled that better than I would have," they muttered, and Miss Rumiki simply nodded, still processing the disrespect veiled in politeness. Fight to the death, and heavily relied on portals to strike from afar, forcing the third company into a brutal and unpredictable engagement. There was also evidence discovered aboard the Mandarin ship, signs of a ritual involving unknown symbols and a disturbing central object, Miss Rumiki said firmly, standing by the human's report. The Zumra representative on the screen rolled her eyes and dismissed the concern with a shake of her head, once again focusing on whatever work she was doing off-screen. "Yes, I'm sure this group of Mandarin is somehow more dangerous than the countless others already slaughtered. It doesn't sound like anything the humans can't deal with," she replied flippantly. Miss Rumiki's fronds twitched with frustration as she leaned closer to the screen, her patience thinning. The humans beside her subtly gave her space, sensing the fire building in her tone. "Perhaps they can, but that doesn't mean the Zumra can afford to be ignorant if the threat escalates. You're not so arrogant to believe we couldn't be next, are you?" she said coldly. That jab landed. The other Zumra finally stopped, looked up and folded her hands, clearly taking the conversation seriously at last. "And what could possibly make an offshoot of a broken enemy dangerous to us?" she asked with skeptical defiance. Miss Rumiki glanced at the report again, her eyes falling on the last few images, disturbing photos of an artificial womb holding a fetus surrounded by glowing runes. Because these Mandarin are not just fighting, they're creating something new, something that shouldn't exist. "And if we ignore this, we risk allowing a new enemy to be born," she said, her voice low and resolute. "User performing it. Still, it was possible, especially if the target's mind was already frayed." Miss Rumiki nodded again, more slowly this time, as she considered the request. "It can be done," she said, her voice more cautious than before. "But it comes at a cost." The humans nearby exchanged glances, understanding enough to not press her further. Miss Rumiki sat back in her chair, her fingers lightly tapping the edge of the report still resting in her lap. The Zumra's dismissal still burned in her mind. The alliance wasn't meant to be one-sided. The humans had always shared their discoveries, even when it meant revealing their own vulnerabilities. And yet here they were, being treated like bothersome insects. Her fronds flicked again, irritation simmering just beneath her composed surface. "We'll need to choose the right prisoner," she muttered. "One already weakened, someone who might crack before I do." Her words were sharp, her tone more calculating now. One of the humans at the console turned toward her. "We've already separated the most aggressive from the others. There's one who hasn't spoken since capture, barely even moved." Miss Rumiki stood, her resolve strengthening. "Take me to him. If the Zumra won't listen to reason, then we'll get the truth ourselves." The humans moved quickly to escort her, their expressions turning serious. As they walked, the tension that had coiled in her chest began to settle, not out of peace but purpose. The alliance had to be more than just words. And if that meant doing what the elders wouldn't, then she'd carry that burden herself. Hand over hers, giving it a gentle squeeze, as if to say he understood even before she spoke. "They want me to try reading the prisoner's mind," she said quietly, avoiding his gaze. Caden's hand tensed for a brief moment, but he didn't pull away. "You don't have to," he said, though they both knew that wasn't entirely true. "There's no one else," she replied, eyes finally meeting his. "It's risky, I know, but if there's even a chance to learn something that could stop whatever the Mandarin are planning, I have to try." Caden let out a slow breath, the smile he wore now bittersweet. "Just promise you'll pull back if it gets to be too much," he said. Miss Rumiki nodded, appreciating the restraint in his voice, the way he let her choose while still voicing his worry. "I promise." For a few moments, they sat together in silence, hands still clasped, the stars reflecting off the glass beyond the room like scattered diamonds. She let the moment stretch a bit longer before rising to her feet. "They're waiting for me." Caden stood too, brushing a hand gently along the side of her arm. "Then I'll be waiting here. Don't make me come chasing after you," he said with a quiet chuckle, trying to lighten the moment. Miss Rimiki offered a faint smile, leaning in to press her forehead against his briefly before pulling away. With a final glance, she turned and walked back the way she had come, each step steady and certain. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it. Mind, body, and memory. Caden reached his hand across the table, resting it palm up before her, silently offering comfort if she chose to accept it. "What's going on?" he asked gently. "There's something I need to do." "But you're not going to like it," Miss Rumiki admitted. After a hesitant pause, she placed her hand in his, making sure the space around them was still private. Caden's grip tightened slightly at her words, already sensing the weight of them. "I'm sure I'll understand," he said with a light, hopeful tone. "You will eventually. That's how you are," she murmured, gently brushing her thumb across the back of his hand. "The Zumra need more than just reports if they're going to treat this seriously. There are Mandarin prisoners on board and—" She trailed off, letting him draw the conclusion. His grip tightened again, this time with resistance. "No, we both know how dangerous that will be for you. They can find someone else," he said firmly. She shook her head, knowing how impossible that really was. They could try, digging through ships to find another Zumra who's willing, but it would take too long, and the cooperation isn't guaranteed. What she didn't say was how much she wanted the truth herself, how the mystery burned at her more personally than professionally. "Something isn't right with the Zumra, Caden," she said, voice low. "I'm capable, and I'm willing. I need to do this." Miss Rumiki spoke with calm certainty, her voice steady as her hand continued its soft, reassuring motion over Caden's. She didn't squeeze tighter, just maintained that quiet contact meant to soothe rather than convince. Caden looked away from her, his eyes drifting back toward the stars beyond the glass, a frown settling over his features. He wasn't naive. He knew that tone, firm but gentle, the one Miss Rumiki used whenever she'd already made up her mind. After a long pause, he sighed. "All right," he murmured, his grip loosening. "Just promise me you'll be careful, if anything starts to go wrong." But Miss Rumiki was already nodding, cutting him off gently. "If anything goes wrong, I'll take care of myself." "I promise to be careful," she said, finishing his thought for him with a soft conviction. Then she leaned forward, resting her head against his in a quiet, tender gesture. Caden's shoulders eased at last, the tension melting away as he returned the contact, closing his eyes against her. "Okay," he whispered. "I'll hold you to that."